Graphing the secant and cosecant graphs are basically drawing the sine and cosine graph and drawing the graphs the other direction. So as the sine and cosine get closer to 0, secant and cosecant are going to be getting closer to infinity. And also if sine and cosine is 1, then the secant and cosecant is 1 because they have reciprocal properties. So to do this, you really have to focus on graphing the reciprocal function first, such as in this case, I'd like to graph y sub 1, which would be equal to the secant of the sine of x minus pi over 2. All right, amplitude is equal to 1, period is equal to 2 pi over b, which is 2 pi. The units are 2 pi over 4. And the phase shift is a negative c over b, which is going to be a negative pi over 2 over 1, which is pi over 2. I want to match these denominators, so I now can take a look at graphing this function. Therefore, let's see, the phase shift is where I start at pi over 2. The units are every pi over 2. And looking at a positive sine graph, starts in the middle and goes up. So that means that you're going to start in the middle and go up when you put in the high, medium, and low points. Now, notice that this is not part of the graph. It's a guideline to show me what the graph looks like. And another thing to remember is where the sine is equal to 0, the cosecant is going to be undefined. So that means that that is going to be an asymptote as well as that, and at 5 pi over 2. Now, these points are the shared points because they're equal to 1 and negative 1. The reciprocals are exactly the same. As the graph of the sine goes closer to 0, the graph of the cosecant is going to be closer to positive infinity. Similarly on the other side, here you're going to 0, but through the negatives, you're going to negative infinity. And that is one complete period of the cosecant. Now notice that it has no amplitude because there is no maximum or minimum points. Let's take a look at another graph. Y equals secant 2x minus 3 pi. Again, I want to think about graphing the cosine of 2x minus 3 pi. And therefore, I have to get my period, which is going to be 2 pi over 2. My phase and the units are pi over 4, and the phase shift is going to be a negative c over 2, which means that this is going to be 3 pi over 2 or 6 pi over 4, matching the denominators. Starting with that, 6 pi over 4, and then I want to go every pi units. So this is going to be 7 pi over 4. There should be 5 points. Now you're going to see that there is a 1 here. So it's still 1 and negative 1. And I'm thinking positive cosine. General positive cosine looks like that. So I'm starting high and I'm going low. This again is dashed because it is not part of the graph, the reciprocal graph. And now I have to remember, where does this have its asymptotes for the secant? It's going to be where the cosine is 0. And therefore, that asymptote looks like this, as well as this. Asymptotes are not part of the graph. And now we're going to do the reciprocal graph to these. That to me is one complete cycle, and it's the reciprocal of the cosine graph. So use the cosine and the sine graph. Stay away from the tables. So at this point, you should have memorized 4 graphs. The sine, cosine, positive, negative, as well as the tangent and cotangent graph.